Hello and welcome back to the Franchise Growth Pod. My name is Belle, Director of Marketing at AC Inc., and I am back with Mr. President, Stephen Inglefield. How's it going, Stephen?
It's going well, thank you. I get used to Mr. President.
Yeah, I don't know if I really want to call you that like ongoing, but we'll use it for a little podcast intro. I don't mind that. How are you doing? How have things been going? How was your weekend?
Yeah, things have been going well. I had a wedding on a little island here called Pender Island in British Columbia, which was very, very nice this weekend. And yeah, now back to another busy week.
Love it. I'm going to a wedding on Pender Island this summer too. What are the
Wow.
chances? That's actually crazy. Was it at a spot with a bunch of little cottages, like all together?
Yeah, it's a place called Poets Cove. If you haven't been, you should. It's a beautiful little location.
So beautiful. Pender Island is such a stunning spot. It's at for anyone who doesn't know, actually, Steve and I used to be based in the exact same city, which is kind of fun considering our team is very virtual and we collaborate obviously via Zoom most of the time. So it's kind of fun that you and I are like kind of from the same place and get to reference all of the same locations.
And then you upped and left and abandoned us.
Oh, yes, I did not. Maybe I shouldn't have brought that up. Stephen was a little, just a little tiny bit hurt when I decided to move last year. But we're all happy now. And I'm actually coming back for lots of visits, as referenced by the fact that I'm going to Pender Island for a wedding this summer. So we'll have to get in lots of visits with the team who's based on the island there.
Sure will.
Um, Stephen, I have kind of one singular question I want to get out of this episode today. I want to do a bit of a definition today because we have a lot of conversations, especially you being the role that you have. You're very forward facing, talk to a lot of our clients, get to, as you say, like go under the hood, look under the hood of lots of different systems and kind of really explore what people have in place for their franchisee support. And then, of course, figure out ways to optimize it or to put it in place if there's none in place. So you get to see a lot of the way a lot of different systems do franchisee support and franchisee success and all of that. So you have this very cool perspective. And so I wanted to get you on to talk about what exactly is a field support framework. So I want to start with, and I'll just define this one because we'll just do it quick. We've talked about it in lots of other episodes, but if you're a new listener, field support is really just the overall term that we use for franchisee support. So we use kind of the term field because oftentimes these are the people who are out in the field. So either working with franchisees kind of in their stores, in their locations, in their communities, and then also kind of in the field, even when it's virtual, because you're really helping the franchisees who are out in the field, out in their communities, optimize their business. We use the word field as kind of just an overall term. And then of course the support is kind of speaking to the coaching, the training, the support, the ongoing connection that coaches have with franchisees. So we kind of just use it as an overall term for any kind of franchisee support, franchisee training, franchisee coaching. And then the framework is what I want to get Stephen's thoughts on today and just kind of get an overall definition because we use that term kind of a lot. And I thought it would be helpful to just get from your perspective, from someone who talks to brands and sees these different frameworks in place, what exactly are we talking about when we say that term?
Yeah, I think the word framework really relates to the method of of coaching and of support. And so really in the in the same way as a recipe, a food recipe, when you're cooking a meal, you know what the ingredients are and you know what you're trying to make, but there's a step-by-step process of all of the different stages that need to happen. And so when we're talking about frameworks, we're talking about things such as how often are we meeting with the franchisees? How are we meeting with the franchisees? Is it in person? Is it a Zoom call? Is it a system-wide town hall or roundtable where we're bringing the team together? And then really just the approach. Are we looking at problem solving? Are we looking at proactively coaching? Are we looking at team building and a culture exercise? Really, just all of those individual aspects that make up the framework. And what's really important is there's not really one proven process. It is very custom to every system because every system is going to have a different culture, a different persona that builds up their ideal franchisee. And so that's really where there's an art to developing. You can't just say, hey, what works for one system works for the other. You really have to understand your brand and understand the franchisees you have in your system.
Yeah, I think that's so, so key. And just talking about, as you said, like a couple details of the framework would be again, like how often you touch base with your franchisees, how those interactions go. Do you have kind of a plan? And actually, I will link an episode that our VP of Ops, Jennifer Brannon, who has worked with so many incredible brands on developing their frameworks, is kind of our content pro when it comes to that. She actually did an awesome episode talking about what a call structure, kind of an example of one would look like, and that's going to probably help give people a bit of a better idea as well when we talk about like what do we mean by a coaching call structure. So I will link that episode in the notes, so if you're interested in kind of learning more, just getting a better picture of what we're talking about when we mean that, that's a really, really great one to listen to. So I'm curious though, you talked about kind of creating frameworks are going to look different, right? Depending on probably the size of your system and again, the culture of your system. And we've talked in the past, like some concepts are super technical and like there's 1,000 little steps that are just involved even in their processes. And then sometimes systems are a lot more kind of not cookie cutter, but a lot more kind of well structured. They've been done many times, right? People can kind of adopt them for different types of concepts. So it's all going to be very different, right? But we at AC Inc. have kind of created a field support framework that kind of can be applied, or not the exact same one, but can kind of be you look at a system and then you apply this framework idea of, okay, we need to figure out the coaching call structure. We need to figure out the messaging that we have with our franchisees, right? How those calls go, what kinds of goals are we working towards, what kind of spreadsheet, all this kind of stuff that leads into that framework. Maybe I'll get you to start with kind of creating that framework. I know Angela has been obviously a very key part of it, and we've mentioned that in other episodes as well. But building out that framework, like what was kind of the motivation behind that, and like how did that kind of process? We've been doing that obviously for a while, building out that framework. But going back a while, kind of how did that process look, and what was kind of the motivation of building out something that could then be applied to different systems depending on what they're needing?
Yeah, I think we may get a Guinness World Record here for the amount of times the word framework has been said in a sentence.
Yeah,
But but
we'll
we but just to add a couple more in, we really built the framework for building frameworks.
yeah.
And so really what we want to look at is first of all, we want to look at the technical aspect of the system. How much interaction does the franchisee really need to be able to deliver that role? An example would be, we work with a brand, they flip houses and they go in and they have the realty aspect, they have then the renovation aspect, working as a general contractor. There's lots of different things happening in a system like that. And so they need to have a lot more touch points with their support team than maybe a system that is potentially like a mobile home services concept, where really this is how you go and get the leads, this is how you go and get your clients, etc., etc. So it's having conversations with the leadership team first of all to see really what are the demands, and then also looking at separating up when we're looking at technical aspects to business coaching aspects. They're two different sides of support, and some systems need both. Some systems really only require the coaching element a little bit more. So we want to look at has the regardless of whatever way we want something consistent. We want something that's easy to communicate and something that's easy for the franchisee to follow. And so, as the franchisor and as the support team, we want to make sure that in every single call, we're going back to the system, the process that we've put in place.
Yeah.
And it's that old sort of comment that a system or a process is only as good as the people following it. And so if it could simply be a spreadsheet. It could simply be, what were your action steps? Did we follow them? What's next for the next 10 days, whatever that might be. As long as we're using it over and over again, it's a good place to start. Now, when you become slightly larger of a system, we've got a lot more franchisees, a lot more teams. Obviously, those support frameworks become a lot more sophisticated. And we like to encourage EOS traction as an option. But really anything that's then looking, okay, what's your overall goal? Let's do a work back schedule. If you want to be there in 5 years, 10 years, where do we need to be at the end of this year? And if we're going to try to achieve that at the end of this year. What do we need to do in the next 90 days? And that really allows us to communicate to our franchisees what their priority list is. A lot of the times, franchisees like to do the things they're good at, but the things they're good at aren't necessarily the things that they either need in that moment or things that are going to move the needle. They can, you know, change their social media post all day long, but maybe that's not the thing that's important for them in that time. So creating the priority list is really important.
Yeah, so key. And I think you going into a couple examples there just gave even so much more of a solid vision of kind of what a framework really is and kind of, what creating a, again, framework to develop frameworks really looks like and kind of part of that process. And I like the analyzing the technical side and then figuring out the consistency side, right? So what is it based on the technicalities of your specific concept that we can create that consistency, but not only consistency, also something that is going to consistently be effective, right? So something that's actually going to move the needle, creating that priority list, all those types of pieces that kind of play into this overall framework for success. And so I think we've officially hit 100 frameworks maybe in this.
Well, and the one thing I'd add as well is you want to also have some way of evaluating how effective your, can we say F word now? How effective your F word is. But it's great to say we've got a system in place, but do we know how effective it is? Is it optimized? Does it needs to evolve over time? If you've got 20 franchisees, it's going to look a lot different to 500 franchisees. And so being able to not only be evaluating and reviewing with our franchisees, but we need as a leadership team to be continuously evaluating and reviewing the framework that we've got. And that can come from different things such as your franchisee satisfaction, engagement, NPS scores, actual revenue numbers. Are we able to show that numbers are still increasing? Are we showing plateaus? Are we showing regression rates? And so being able to evaluate all the time, not only the people that are doing the role, which we've discussed on other podcasts, but the actual container in which they're working from. These are all things that are really integral to a successful support program.
Amazing, amazing. Stephen, this has been so valuable. And I think just getting a little bit more information around, again, the definitions of kind of these key terms, we really are entering into kind of this time of franchisee support and field support programs being such a bigger piece of franchising, and especially successful, effective franchise brands and kind of the way that they're seeing their brands grow and develop. So I think it's just so important for us to be continuing to talk about kind of what these terms mean and kind of connecting all the dots, because this is, again, still a bit of a newer space and a thing that not all brands have in place immediately right now. So I just loved being able to kind of pick your brain on that. And I think there's a really solid picture now of when people hear that or hear a field support program or franchisee support program or framework, all these different words, it's just going to clue into kind of what exactly that means, what it actually looks like in practice, and how it actually connects back to, again, our overall business goals, our franchisees' goals, all those pieces. So just want to thank you. That was awesome. Is there anything you want to add before we finish up our episode today?
I think the only thing I would add is that right now, if you're listening to this and thinking that you haven't reviewed your framework for a while, whether a year or so, or if you're supporting your franchisees, but it's been somewhat a reactive development where your franchisees have asked for support, and so you've put measures in place, but you haven't really done a deep dive, then you can absolutely reach out to me directly, and we can chat about how we can do a review of that of your current practices and give some recommendations on how it can be improved.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, thank you for that that call to action. Yeah, and definitely, if anyone is interested in getting in touch with Stephen, just and even again, just talking about assessing what you currently have in place, or even saying, are we at a point where we need to have this in place, or we have this in place and we think it's working, or we're not sure, any of the above, you can head to angelacote.com/contact. You'll see a form pop up that you can, as soon as you fill that in, that'll give you a chance to book an initial call directly with Stephen. So that's a really great opportunity to open up that conversation. And thank you all so much for listening. We are just so proud of where this podcast has gone in the past year and a bit. And it's so fun to continue to have these conversations and talk about all things franchisee support and franchise growth. And we just, yeah, thank you guys so much for continuing to listen. So thank you, Stephen, and go be awesome.